Greetings of the day to all my dear students. I hope that you all are in good health. This is Shreya Jadhav welcoming you all to my e-learning channel. And today I want to share one thing with you. Study hard. No matter if it seems impossible, no matter if it takes time, no matter if you have to up all night. Just remember that the feeling of success is the best thing in the entire world. With this, today we are going to learn English Grade 9 Supplementary Reading 6 Weathering Storm in Ersama, written by Harsh Mandar. This is part 2 of the chapter. So, before starting with the reading and explanation of the chapter, let us know something about the author. About the author. Harsh Mandar was born in Shillong in the year 1955. He is a writer and social worker. He has worked as an IAS in the states of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh for almost 2 decades, mainly as the head of the district governments of tribal districts. He was awarded the Rajiv Gandhi National Award for Peace Work and the MA Thomas National Human Rights Award. Introduction for answer. Dear students, always remember that we are supposed to start our answer with introduction. This creates a good impact. Prose. Prose name Weathering the Storm of Ersama. Author's name Harsh Mandar. Genre short story. Summary. It is a description of the brave acts of courageous boy named Prashant. He guided the victims of a flood. Summary. Now we shall start with the summary of the chapter. Weathering the storm in Ersama is a description of brave acts of courageous boy named Prashant. He guided the victims of floods who gathered at the Red Cross shed in his village in Orissa. He mobilized each person of the community to help one another. This lesson tells us the importance of the young segment of the society. They can get together and work for the community during the natural calamities. They can help, guide, and save the community with medicines, care, material, and food. The value of the young is recognized at the time of need. Prashant visited one of his old friend's house in Ersama in the evening of 27th October 1999. There came a superstorm. The black storm gathered there. Heavy and continuous rain filled the darkness. Trees were uprooted. Everything was destroyed. Prashant was very worried about his family in the village. He did not know what had happened to them. He decided to go back to his home. He started his long journey to his village. On the way, he found two friends of his uncle. They were also returning home. On the way through, they paused away pushed away the dead bodies of children, men, women, and skeletons of animals. Finally, they all reach Prashant's village. Prashant's heart froze up to see water everywhere. At first, he met his maternal grandmother at Red Cross shed. She had become weak with hunger. There was a fatal scene at the shelter. Around 2,500 people had taken shelter there. The people there had survived on green coconut. Prashant took up the lead. He organized a group of youth and leaders. Prashant became a leader of the village. He sent a delegation to the merchant and got the full quota of rice for the people taking shelter in the shade. Then he organized a team of volunteers to clean the shelter. On the fifth day of the camp, one military helicopter dropped food packets but did not return again. Then the youth task force was set up. The group deputed the children to lie on the floor. They had the empty utensils in their stomachs, but that they were able to communicate to passing helicopters that they were hungry. Finally, the helicopters dropped good quantity of food there. Prashant brought orphaned children and made a shelter for them. He asked for some women to look after them. With assistance of NGO, he started Food for Work program. He also engaged few of the volunteers to help widows to start their lives again. Even after the months of devastating cyclone, people seek Prashant's help in their days of grief. So, dear students, this is all about the summary of the chapter. Now, let us start with the reading and explanation of it. Supplementary Unit 6, Weathering the Storm in Ersama. The cyclone that hit Orissa in October 1999 killed thousands of people and devastated hundreds of villages. For 2 dreadful nights, Prashant, a young man, was marooned on the roof of a house. On the third day, he decided to go to his village. Did he find his family? Let us see. On 27 October 1999, 7 years after his mother's death, Prashant had gone to the block headquarters of Ersama, a small town in coastal Orissa, some 18 kilometers from his village, to spend a day with a friend. By the next morning, as he took in the desperate situation in the shelter, he decided to get a grip over himself. He sensed a deathly grief settling upon the 2,500 strong crowd in the shelter. 86 lives were lost in the village. All the 96 houses had been washed away. It was their 4th day at the shelter. So far, they had survived on green coconuts, but there were too few to go around such a tumult of people. So, next day, when he went to the shelter, at that time he saw that how desperate the situation was. And then he thought that now he was supposed to take a step forward. he sensed that there were around 2,500 people of crowd under the shelter, out of which 86 have lost their lives. Moreover to that, there were total 96 houses, and the present situation, no houses were seen. They were surviving for the past 3 days. That was their fourth day. Moreover to that, they have survived on green coconuts. But there were too few to go around such a tumult of people. But now it was not possible for them to go and survive for the upcoming days without any help. Prashant, all of 19 years, decided to step in as leader of his village if no one else did. He organized a group of youths and elders to jointly pressurize the merchant once again to part with his rice. This time the delegation succeeded and returned triumphantly, wading through the receding waters with food for the entire shelter. No one cared that the rice was already rotting. So now, eventually, what happened? That Prashant was only 19 years old, and at that time, he decided that he would step and become a leader for his village if no one else was going to take the designation. So then he organized a group of youths and elders, and all of them jointly went and pressurized the merchant once again to part with his rice. This time they were successful and returned triumphantly. Moreover to that, the receding waters with the food have been waded the entire shelter, and the rice were rotten, but eventually no one cared about it that the rice was already rotting. Branches from fallen trees were gathered to light a reluctant and slow fire on which to cook the rice. For the first time in 4 days, the survivors at the cyclone shelter were able to fill their bellies. His next task was to organize a team of youth volunteers to clean the shelter of filth, urine, vomit, and floating carcasses, and to tend to the wounds and the fractures of the many who have been injured. So now it was that no one even cared that the rice were rotting, the branches of the fallen trees were gathered, and a little light and reluctant slow fire was put, and on which the rice was cooked. And for the first time in 4 days, the survivors were able to fill up their bellies. The next thing was to organize a team of young people who would help to clean the shelter of filth, urine, vomit, and floating carcasses. And moreover to that, if the people who have been injured during were tended to be treated with some fractures or wound. On the fifth day, a military helicopter flew over the shelter and dropped some food parcels. It then did not return. The youth task force gathered empty utensils from the shelter. Then they deputed the children to lie in the sand left by the waters around the shelter with these utensils on their stomachs to communicate to the passing helicopters that they were hungry. The message got through, and after that, the message got through that, and after that, helicopter made rounds of the shelter, airdropping food and other basic needs. So now, eventually, what happened? That on the fifth day, there was a military helicopter which flew over the shelter and dropped some food parcels. And after that, it did not return. And the youth were forced to gather the empty utensils from the shelter. And they deputed, means they told the children that they were supposed to lie in the sand, and they were supposed to put their utensils on their stomachs to communicate to the helicopters passing high above that they were hungry. The message got through, and after that the helicopter made regular rounds of the shelter and airdropping foods and other basic needs. Prashant found that a large number of children had been orphaned. He brought them together and put up a polythene sheet shelter for them. Women were mobilized to look after them, while the men secured food and materials for the shelter. So now Prashant then later came to know that there were many children who were orphaned. So he brought them all together and put up a polythene sheet shelter for them. Women were mobilized to look after them, while the men secured for the food and other materials which were necessary for the shelter. As the weeks passed, Prashant was quick to recognize that women and children were sinking deeper and deeper in their grief. He persuaded that women to start working in the food for the work program started by an NGO, and for the children he organized sports event. So eventually what happened, that this situation to come out from this flood, it was very difficult for him as well as for 2500 people who were suffering. And slowly and gradually he recognized that women and children were sinking deeper and deeper in grief. So he told women to start working in for food for work program, which was started by NGO, and he used to organize some sports event for the children. He himself loved to play cricket, and so, with other volunteers, in helping the widow and children to pick up their broken pieces of their lives. The initial government plan was to set up an institution for orphans and widows. However, this step was successfully resisted, as it was felt that in such institutions children would grow up without love, and widows would suffer from a stigma of loneliness. Prashant's group believed orphans should be resettled in their own community itself, possibly to new foster families made up of childless widows and children without adult care. So eventually what happened, that he told that no, he started engaging other volunteers in some other work to help out the widows, to help out the children. Moreover to that, how to know join all the broken pieces of these people. At an initial stage, government planned certain programs, certain institutes, that they would build the orphans and widows institution first. But however, it was not possible that without love the children would grow. So the widows would suffer from the stigma of loneliness, and Prashant also believed that orphans should be resettled in their own community. Possibly there might be new foster families which made these childless widows and children without adult care. It was 6 months after the devastation of the super cyclone. This time, Prashant's wounded spirit had healed simply because he had no time to bother about his own pain. His handsome, youthful face is what the widows and orphan children of his village seek out most in the darkest hour of grief. So now it was that almost 6 months time duration was passed, and before 6 months, this devastating super cyclone had destroyed everything. And this time, Prashant was all of a sudden a new spirit. He was simply healed, and he didn't had any time to bother about his own pain. His handsome and youthful face, and no people and children and widows and men, women, everybody would seek out whenever they were in grief or whenever they were in any sort of tension. They were the first people to reach out, and they would always go and ask for Prashant's help. So, dear students, this is all about the chapter. I hope that you all have understood it well. And we are always supposed to remember and keep in mind that whenever there is any person who is in need, and if we are capable of helping them out, then we should never think or we should never hesitate. We should always feel free that no matter whatever the situation may be, whatever we are able to do for that person, we should always uh, help people, because it is a way of showing that still we are human, and by reducing someone else's grief and sorrow, there are chances that we may find our own, we may seek our own happiness, we may seek our own satisfaction about the same. So, this is indeed a beautiful chapter written by Harsh Mandar. So, dear students, thank you for watching and have a nice day. And if you still find any doubt or queries, you can comment down in the comment section below. Goodbye, everyone.